welcome. And thank you for being here. There's no need to do anything at all. Simply allow my voice to be a soft companion. As you begin to drift toward the quiet story of a city that held its breath. A city of marble and noise and a million overlapping lives, all waiting for a single man to arrive. Before we drift too far into those ancient streets, if you feel a connection to this place of calm, you're welcome to leave a quiet like or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. You could even, if you wish, leave a quiet comment to let me know which city you're listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's a comfort to know where these stories land, but these are just gentle thoughts. Your peaceful presence here is what truly matters. And so, find that gentle darkness in your room, perhaps with a soft blanket pulled a little closer, as we begin our slow drift into tonight's tale. The air in the city is thick. It's not just the usual Roman cocktail of wood smoke, baking bread, and the distant, dusty smell of the Circus Maximus. No, this is a different kind of thickness. It's the air of anticipation, heavy with things left unsaid. For weeks, it has been like this. A city of a million people, all collectively holding their breath. From your window, high up in one of the teetering apartment blocks that lean against each other for support, you can see the rooftops stretching out like a cracked and sun-bleached mosaic. Usually the noise from the street below is a constant river of sound, the clatter of wagon wheels on stone, the shouts of merchants, the endless arguments and greetings. But today, a strange quiet hangs over it all, because the old wolf is finally gone. The Emperor Tiberius is dead. For years, he ruled not from the grand palace on the Palatine Hill, but from a fortified villa on a distant island, a place that lived in the public imagination as a nest of paranoia and dark secrets. From there his letters and decrees would arrive in Rome like stones dropped into a still pond, sending out ripples of fear. Treason trials had become a grim fact of life. A carelessly spoken word at dinner party, a joke told to the wrong person, could lead to your name being whispered in the wrong corridors. Senators lived in terror. The people felt abandoned. And now, 8 years gone, the news had trickled in at first, a rumor so dangerous that no one dared repeat it too loudly. What if it was a trick? Another of the old emperor's loyalty tests. But then came the official confirmation. And the city, after a moment of stunned silence, had erupted. Not in wild, joyous parties, but in a wave of profound, exhausted relief. You saw it yourself. Damon down in the courtyard looked at his neighbor, received a slow, deliberate nod, and then just slumped against a wall, his face in his hands weeping. The official story is that Tiberius died of old age, his 80-year-old body finally giving out. But in the wine shops and the bathhouses, the whispers tell a different tale. Some say his own grandnephew, the very man who is now on his way to Rome, smothered him with a pillow. Others say it was the head of the Praetorian Guard who did the deed, to ensure a smooth and rapid succession. Historians, to this day, sift through the gossip and the official records, trying to piece together the final moments on that island of fear. But from your window, looking down at the expectant city, you think perhaps it doesn't matter how the monster died, only that he is gone, and that his heir is coming. His name is Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. It's a mouthful, a name that carries the weight of history. The name Caesar, the name Augustus, but most importantly, the name Germanicus. His father, Germanicus, was the hero Rome had needed, but never got to have as emperor. He was the dashing general, the beloved commander, the man who had won victories on the Rhine and recaptured the lost eagle standards from the German tribes. His death, years ago, was a moment of national trauma, a grief so deep it felt personal to everyone. And this young man, this Gaius, is his son. That is the source of all the hope that now electrifies the air. He is not the heir of the hated Tiberius. In the hearts of the people, he is the heir of the beloved Germanicus. He is the living symbol of a second chance. A murmur ripples through the street below, growing into a roar. You lean further out of your window, craning your neck. In the distance, you can see the procession. It's not a military triumph with chained captives and stolen gold. It is something far more potent. Here he comes, riding in a simple chariot, flanked by his sisters. He's young, barely 25. He doesn't have the stern, imposing look of a traditional Roman general. He's tall, a little awkward in his posture, and as he turns his head, you see a face that is not yet hardened by power. The crowds are surging, screaming, throwing flowers. They are not just cheering for a new emperor. They are cheering for the end of a nightmare and the beginning of a dream. They are betting the entire future of the Roman world on the shoulders of this one young man. And as the roar washes over you, you realize they are not shouting his official name, that long list of inherited glories. They are shouting a nickname, a name from his childhood, from the army camps of his father. A name that sounds like affection, like hope itself. Caligula. They scream, their voices roll with emotion. Caligula. Hail, Caligula. Little Boots. That name. Little Boots. It's a strange thing to call an emperor, the most powerful man in the world. It's not a name that screams authority or divinity. It's a pet name, a diminutive, something you'd call a beloved child. And as the sound of it washes over the city, a collective memory seems to stir. Let's leave the cheering crowds on the sun-baked Roman street for a moment, and let your mind drift back, further back, to a place much colder and much less certain. Picture a different scene. Not the marble heart of a great empire, but its rugged, dangerous edge. We are on the banks of the Rhine River, a frontier posting. The air is damp, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. The sky is a vast, moody grey. All around you is the organized chaos of a massive Roman army camp. The rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the low murmur of thousands of men, the smell of leather and wood smoke and sweat. These are not the pampered city dwellers of Rome. These are hardened legionaries, men whose faces are maps of old campaigns, whose hands are calloused from the sword and the shovel. They are a tough, cynical crowd. And into the middle of this rough world walks a child. He's barely old enough to make a coherent sentence, maybe 2 or 3 years old. But he's not dressed in a simple child's tunic. His father, the commanding General Germanicus, has had a miniature legionary uniform made for him. A tiny breastplate, a little toy sword, and most importantly, the boot. The standard issue footwear for a Roman soldier is the collega, a heavy-duty open-toed sandal with a sole studded with iron hobnails. They are designed for marching hundreds of miles, for kicking down doors, for finding a firm footing on a bloody battlefield. And this little boy, this toddler, has his own pair, custom-made for his tiny feet. They are Caligula little boots. You can almost see it, the hobnails on his tiny sandals clicking on the stones. The veteran soldiers, men who have faced down charging German tribesmen, stop what they are doing. A slow grin spreads across a grizzled face, a chuckle, then a roar of affectionate laughter. They lift him up, ruffle his hair, declare him their mascot. He is the son of their beloved general, born and raised in the camp. He is one of them. Then as a term of genuine endearment, Caligula. It's a brilliant move by his father Germanicus. Part genuine paternal pride, part masterful public relations. It binds the army to his family with a loyalty that goes beyond mere duty. But for the boy himself, the name will become a burden. As a grown man, as emperor, sources say he will come to despise it, to see it as a reminder of a childish image he wants to shed. It is, perhaps, the first hint of the deep insecurity that will curdle into something far more dangerous. This idyllic time in the cold north does not last. Germanicus, his wife Agrippina, and their large family are sent east on a grand tour of the provinces. It is here that the boy's world shatters. In Antioch, his heroic father, the hope of Rome, falls ill and dies. He is only 34. The official records, the ones approved by the Emperor Tiberius, will state that Germanicus died of a sudden tragic illness. But the stories that his mother Agrippina told, the whispers that led her and her orphaned children back to Rome. They painted a much darker picture, a picture of witchcraft, of curses found hidden under the floorboards of his room. Historians to this day argue about the death of Germanicus. Was it truly a sickness, a fever that took him in his prime, or was he murdered? The prime suspect in the whispered version of the story was the governor of Syria, News Calpurnius Piso, a man seen as a crony of the Emperor Tiberius. The motive, jealousy. Tiberius, old and paranoid, couldn't stand the dazzling popularity of his adopted son and heir. So, he had him removed. But before a verdict could be reached, he was found dead in his home. Another convenient end to an inconvenient story. We will never know for sure. What we do know is what you see next. A heartbroken and furious woman, Agrippina, stepping off a ship at the port of Brundisium. She is dressed in black, her face a mask of grief, and in her hands, she clutches a single, solemn urn. It holds the ashes of her husband. The entire city, it seems, has come out to meet her, their silent, weeping forms lining the road all the way to Rome. And walking beside her, his small hand in hers, is the boy, the little mascot from the army camp. He is no longer a symbol of good luck, but a symbol of the nation's deepest tragedy. And so the cheers for Little Boots that you hear ringing through the forum today, as he rides into the city as its new master, are not just for the boy. They are for the ghost of the father he represents. They are a plea, a prayer that this son will finally fulfill the promise of Germanicus. That this time, hope will not be poisoned in a far-off land. This time the story will have a happy ending. The cheers fade. The hopeful faces of the Roman crowd blur and dissolve. And the scene shifts. The sun-drenched marble of Rome gives way to a different kind of light, a harsh, brilliant glare bouncing off a turquoise sea. The air, once thick with wood smoke and hope, is now sharp with the scent of salt and lemon groves. You find yourself on an island, Capri. But this is no holiday resort. For the teenage Gaius Caligula, this is both a gilded cage and a brutal school of survival. After the death of his father Germanicus and the family's somber return to Rome, things began to unravel. His mother, Agrippina, was a woman of iron will and fierce pride. She saw enemies everywhere, chief among them the Emperor Tiberius, whom she openly blamed for her husband's death. It was a dangerous game to play, in the suffocating atmosphere of Tiberius' court. Her defiance was not seen as brave, but as seditious. One by one, Caligula's family was picked off. His two older brothers were arrested on charges of treason. They would vanish into the imperial prison system, never to be seen alive again, dying of starvation in conditions of horrific neglect. His mother was exiled to a barren island, where she too would perish, reportedly after being flogged so severely that she lost an eye. Can you imagine it, being a young boy, maybe 13 or 14, and watching your entire world dismantle, your protectors, your family, all systematically destroyed by the will of one man, the man who is now summoning you to his side? And so you arrive on Capri. The Emperor Tiberius, now an old man in his 70s, had abandoned Rome years ago, choosing to rule the vast empire from this island fortress. From a distance, it looks like paradise. 12 opulent villas cling to the cliffs, filled with priceless items surrounded by lush gardens. But up close, you feel the rot. The place is crawling with spies, informers, and astrologers who trade in prophecies and secrets. The atmosphere is not one of imperial grandeur, but of deep, curdling paranoia. This is the man who becomes Caligula's guardian, the very man he almost certainly believed had murdered his father and destroyed his family. Tiberius is your new father. He is also your jailer. You walk the colonnaded hallways of the village Ovis, the emperor's main residence, and you learn the first and most important rule of this place. Do not show your true feelings, ever. You see it in the young Caligula's face. He develops a mask, a blank, unreadable expression. The ancient historian Suetonius, who loved a bit of juicy gossip, claims that Caligula spent his days perfecting this impassive look, while at night, he would don disguises and indulge in secret debaucheries. But another writer, Tacitus, gives a more chilling account. He says that the young man became a master of sycophancy, a perfect actor. He would watch Tiberius's moods, anticipate his desires, echo his opinions. He learned to be a mirror, reflecting back whatever the old emperor wanted to see. Tacitus wrote, memorably, that never was there a better servant or a worse master. Here, on this island, you witness the daily lessons in tyranny. Tiberius, a man soured by decades of real and imagined betrayals, rules by fear. You watch as messengers arrive with reports from Rome, their faces pale. The emperor will read a scroll, his brow furrowed, and then mutter a name. That name belongs to a senator, a wealthy knight, someone who will soon be accused of treason. Their property will be confiscated, their life forfeit. There is no appeal. And Caligula watches. He learns. He learns that absolute power means you never have to explain yourself. He learns that cruelty can be a tool, a way to keep people off balance and terrified. There's a strange, and frankly creepy, little detail from this time that has survived. Tiberius was fascinated by his grandnephew's strange blend of servility and what he perceived as a hidden, savage nature. He was reportedly fond of quoting a line from a tragic play when looking at Caligula. "I am nursing a viper for the Roman people." It's a chilling observation. Did the old emperor see the darkness he himself was helping to shape, or was he simply admiring the ruthlessness he saw reflected in the boy's eyes? It's one of those historical details that makes the hair on your arms stand up. The days on Capri are long and tense. You are surrounded by beauty but suffocated by fear. You see the young man who arrived here as an orphan become something else. The grief he must have felt for his mother and brothers is buried so deep it might as well be in another country. In its place grows a profound cynicism. He learns that to survive, you must be more cunning. You must be more patient than your enemies. He watches Tiberius indulge his darkest whims, treating the world as his personal plaything, and a terrible thought must be taking root in his mind. This is what it means to be emperor. This is power. So when the news finally comes that Tiberius is on his deathbed, there is no grief. There is only a cold, calculated readiness. The years of acting, of hiding, of surviving are over. The viper, so carefully nursed by the old wolf, is finally ready to strike. He has graduated from the school of tyranny with top honors. The oppressive stillness of Capri dissolves, and you find yourself back in Rome, breathing that hopeful air once again. The transition is dizzying. One moment you are trapped in a sun-drenched prison of paranoia, the next you are at the very center of the world's adoration. The young man who had to master a blank, unreadable face to survive is now mobbed by cheering crowds wherever he goes. And for a while, for a few blissful months, it seems like the city's wildest dreams are coming true. This isn't just a new reign, it feels like a new dawn. The first thing you notice is the sound of celebration. Caligula, now emperor, declares a public festival. He opens the treasury, the vast, jealously guarded fortune that Tiberius had spent decades hoarding, and showers it upon the people. Sacrifices are made to the gods on a scale not seen in years. It's said that over 160,000 animals were offered in the first 3 months alone. The smell of roasting meat, a scent of prosperity and divine favor, hangs over the city. You watch as he delivers his first speech to the Senate, the very body that had lived in silent terror of his predecessor. And the words he speaks are everything they have longed to hear. He promises to rule in partnership with them, to respect their traditions. He condemns the treasoned riles of Tiberius' reign, declaring them a thing of the past. He burns the records of the informants, a huge bonfire in the forum that symbolizes a clean slate. Old men who had learned to keep their heads down and their opinions to themselves weep with relief. It's a masterful performance. Then he does something that touches the heart of every Roman. He sets sail, personally, into the stormy seas to retrieve the remains of his mother and brother, the ones who had been exiled and left to rot on barren islands. He brings their ashes back to Rome and lays them to rest with full honors in the mausoleum of Augustus. It's a public act of filial piety, a demonstration that he is, first and foremost, the son of the beloved Germanicus, righting the wrongs that had been done to his family. The gesture is powerful. It emanates the love of the people, who see in him not a product of Tiberius's toxic court, but a victim of it, now restored to his rightful place. The reforms come thick and fast. He abolishes unpopular taxes. He allows people who had been exiled under Tiberius to return home. He publishes, for the first time, an account of the empire's finances, a gesture of transparency that is utterly shocking after decades of secretive rule. He revives democratic elections for some magistracies, giving a measure of power back to the popular assemblies. To the ordinary person living in your cramped apartment block, it feels like the Republic of old is being reborn. And the games. The spectacles are on a scale that boggles the mind. Chariot races, elaborate theatrical shows. Caligula himself often presides, sitting in the imperial box, basking in the roar of the crowd. He seems to feed off their energy, their adoration. He is witty, charming, and accessible. He mingles with the people. He jokes with the senators. The stiff, fearful formality of the previous reign is gone, replaced by a kind of thrilling, chaotic energy. One of the more peculiar, but popular, things he does is to lift the ban on certain writers. Specifically, authors whose works Tiberius had suppressed for being too critical or republican in sentiment. Suddenly, these forbidden scrolls are being copied and sold in the bookshops again. It's a declaration of free speech, a sign that the new Rome will not be afraid of ideas. It's easy in this golden haze to forget the boy on Capri. It's easy to believe that the darkness has passed, that the trauma of his youth has been washed away by this flood of public love. He seems to be everything his father was: generous, charismatic, and devoted to the people. He even honors his grandmother. Antonia makes his uncle Claudius, long considered the bumbling, embarrassing fool of the family, his consular colleague. He seems to be healing all the family's old wound. That if you look closely, if you stand in the corner of a room during one of his lavish banquets and watch him, while he thinks no one is looking, you might see something else. A flicker of, what is it? An intensity in his eyes that is a little too bright. A laugh that ends a little too abruptly. A sudden, chilling stillness that falls over him in the middle of a chaotic party. It's the briefest of glimpses, a crack in the perfect facade. It's the boy from Capri, the master of the mask, peeking out. For now, though, no one wants to see it. The city is in the grip of a powerful love affair with its new leader. They call him their star, their chick, their baby. The honeymoon is glorious, a sun-drenched season of hope and celebration. The nightmare of Tiberius is over, and the son of Germanicus is on the throne. What could possibly go wrong? The entire world, it seems, is smiling. The party has to end sometime. The golden light that bathed the city begins to feel thin, fragile. And then, it happens. About 8 months into his reign in the autumn of the year 37, the unthinkable occurs. The emperor, the city's beloved star, falls desperately ill. It begins, as these things so often do, as a rumor, a worried whisper among the palace staff. The emperor has taken to his bed. He has a fever. At first, no one is overly concerned. Fevers are common in Rome, a city of swamps and questionable sanitation. But this is different. The illness deepens, becomes terrifyingly severe. The doors to the palace are closed. The usual flurry of activity ceases. A heavy, anxious silence that hung over the city before his arrival. But this time it is filled not with hope, but with dread. You can feel the panic spreading like a contagion. In the temples, crowds gather to pray day and night. The city that had just been celebrating so riotously is now paralyzed with fear. People offer vows promising to give their own lives if only the gods will spare his. One man, in a fit of public devotion, even swears he will fight as a gladiator if Caligula recovers. It's a testament to how deeply the city has invested its hopes in him. His death would not just be a personal tragedy. It would be the death of the dream. It would mean a return to the uncertainty, the fear, the political chaos that everyone thought they had escaped. Inside the palace, you can imagine the scene. The finest physicians in the empire stand helpless around his bed. The air is thick with the smell of medicinal herbs and the cloying scent of fear. He is burning with fever, delirious, his body racked with convulsions. His sisters, especially his favorite, Drusilla, refused to leave his side. What was this mysterious illness? The ancient sources are frustratingly vague. They simply call it a brain fever or a severe sickness brought on by his exhausting lifestyle. Was it a physical ailment? Perhaps encephalitis or a viral infection that attacked his nervous system. Or was it, as some have speculated, something else? Some modern historians and medical experts have tried to diagnose him from a distance of 2,000 years, suggesting everything from epilepsy to hypothyroidism. A more compelling theory, though one impossible to prove, is that it was a profound mental breakdown. The psychological toll of his traumatic childhood, the years of suppressed terror on Capri, the immense pressure of being emperor, all of it might have finally exploded in his mind, manifesting as a physical collapse. We will never know for sure. It remains one of history's great medical mysteries. For weeks he lingers on the brink. The empire holds its breath. And then, slowly, miraculously, the fever breaks. The crisis passes. He is weak, but he is alive. The news of his recovery unleashes a wave of joy even greater than the one that greeted his ascension. The city erupts in celebration. The man who vowed to become a gladiator is reminded of his promise, a promise Caligula will later, with a chilling lack of humor, force him to keep. It feels like a miracle. Their star, their baby, has been given back to them. But as he emerges from the sick room, as he resumes his duties, it becomes clear that the man who went into that fever is not the same man who has come out. Something is broken. The charming, accessible, reform-minded ruler is gone. In his place is someone else, someone volatile, arrogant, and menacing. The change is not immediate, but it's unmistakable. The cracks in the facade you might have glimpsed before have now shattered completely. The first sign is a new, unnerving quality in his eyes. A wildness, a detachment. Then come the words. The easy jokes are replaced by cruel barbs, threats veiled as humor. He becomes obsessed with his own importance, his own divinity. The partnership he promised the Senate is forgotten. Now, he treats them with open contempt, reminding them that he can do anything he wants, to anyone he wants. His relationship with his family also shifts. The public piety is replaced by a possessive, almost tyrannical control, especially over his sisters. He had already named Drusilla his heir during his illness, a shocking break with all tradition, and now his affection for her becomes even more intense, more public, fueling rumors that were already dark and unspeakable. And the spending. The generous, popular spending of the early months becomes something else entirely, a frantic, pathological wastefulness. It's as if the brush with death has convinced him that money, tradition, and human lives are all meaningless trifles to be used for his amusement. The man who emerges from the sickbed is a man who seems to have looked into the abyss and decided he liked the view. A man who has been to the edge of death and come back with no fear, no restraint, and no empathy. The city prayed for his recovery, and their prayers were answered. But in saving his life, they may have lost their emperor. The fever broke, but it seems to have taken his sanity with it. The golden honeymoon is definitively over. The sickness has passed, but a new kind of fever now grips the emperor. A fever of spending. The vast fortune left by the miserly Tiberius, a treasure chest said to contain more than 2.5 billion sesterces, was supposed to be the bedrock of the empire's stability. For Caligula, it's just a pile of coins to be set on fire for the sheer spectacle of the blaze. You're standing in the forum, and the air is glittering. The emperor has decided to put on a show for the people. But instead of the usual distribution of grain or cheap tokens, he has ordered servants to ascend to the roof of the Basilica Julia. From there they begin to toss handfuls of gold and silver coins down into the scrambling crowds below. It's chaos. People shove and fight. A desperate, greedy ballet for the emperor's amusement. Thin sound that doesn't quite reach his eyes. He seems to enjoy the spectacle of human beings reduced to scrabbling animals. This is just the beginning. The games and spectacles, which were once a sign of public generosity, now become monuments to his own ego, each one designed to be more outrageously expensive than the last. He stages gladiatorial contests at odd hours, in the dead of night, forcing people from their beds to witness them. He floods the arena to stage elaborate naval battles with specially built ships crewed by condemned criminals. The cost is astronomical, but the word cost seems to have no meaning for him anymore. Then there are the banquets. A dinner invitation from the emperor, once the highest social honor, is now a summons to a surreal and terrifying piece of theater. You find yourself reclining on a couch, surrounded by obscene luxury. The food is not just food, it's a statement of waste. Dishes of flamingo tongues and peacock brains. Loaves of bread that have been gilded with gold leaf, making them inedible but spectacular. At one famous feast, he allegedly served his guests golden replicas of their food, a joke that highlighted his own wealth and their dependency on his favor. He spends a fortune on clothing, appearing in a series of increasingly bizarre and inappropriate outfits. One day he might dress as the god Apollo, complete with a golden radiate crown. The next, he might appear in the silks of Venus, or even in the full armor of Alexander the Great, a hero he becomes obsessed with. He has Alexander's breastplate flown in from his tomb Egypt and wears it on public occasions. But all of this, the games, the feasts, the clothes, pales in comparison to his passion for building. He embarks on a series of architectural projects that are as pointless as they are expensive. He orders the construction of 2 gigantic pleasure barges for use on the placid waters of Lake Nemi. These aren't just boats, they are French's boats, they are floating palaces. When their remains were salvaged from the lakebed in the 1930s, the world was stunned. They were found to have lead pipes for hot and cold running water, mosaic floors, and heating systems. This was a level of luxury that wouldn't be seen again for more than 1,000 years, all for a couple of weekend party boats on a tiny lake. Historians still debate the exact purpose of these ships. Were they for religious ceremony, or just pure, unadulterated hedonism? He begins extending the imperial palace on the Palatine Hill, building it out until it connects directly with the temple of Castor and Pollux in the forum below. He essentially makes the temple an entrance hall to his own house, a shocking act of impiety. He would stand between the statues of the divine twins, he said, and present himself for worship. Within a year, maybe 2, the impossible has happened. The entire fortune left by Tiberius is gone, squandered, vanished into a black hole of spectacle and ego. The treasury is empty. The empire, for the first time in a generation, is broke. And this is where the spending fever turns truly malignant. Because Caligula has developed a taste for a lifestyle he can no longer afford. He needs money, and he knows exactly where to get it. He resurrects the very treason laws he had so theatrically abolished. But now they are not about security. They are a fundraising tool. Wealthy senators are suddenly accused of absurd crimes, their treasons often amounting to nothing more than having a fortune that the emperor coveted. They are executed, and their property is confiscated by the state, which is to say, by Caligula. He introduces a whole raft of new, bizarre taxes. A tax on food sold in the city. A tax on porters for every load they carry. A tax on legal disputes. He even institutes a tax on services provided by ladies of the night. He is scraping the bottom of every barrel, no matter how undignified. You see the fear returning to the faces of the rich and powerful. The brief, golden spring is a distant memory. The man who promised to be their partner is now their predator. He has burned through the empire's savings, and now he intends to burn through theirs. The laughing, generous boy emperor is gone for good. In his place is a man with a bottomless appetite for gold and a terrifying willingness to do anything to get it. The party isn't just over, the bill has come due, and he expects everyone else to pay it. Amidst the escalating chaos of the reign, the wild spending and the growing fear, there is one relationship that seems to anchor Caligula's increasingly erratic world: his bond with his sister Drusilla. But this is no ordinary sibling affection, it's an obsession, a public performance of devotion so intense and so strange that it leaves all of Rome whispering. You see them together constantly. In a society where even married couples maintained a degree of public decorum, Caligula and Drusilla are inseparable. At the lavish banquets, she reclines in the place of honor, the traditional seat of the emperor's wife, even though she is married to another man. He consults her on matters of state, defers to her judgment in public, and bestows upon her honors that no Roman woman has ever received before. During his terrible illness, you'll recall, he did the unthinkable. He officially named her as his heir. Not his uncle Claudius, not a distant cousin, but his sister. This shattered every Roman precedent. Power was a man's game, passed down through male lines. To name a woman as his successor was a radical, revolutionary act. At the time, he was seen as a sign of his deep love and desperation. Now, in the clear light of his post-fever strangeness, it seems like another piece of a very disturbing puzzle. The whispers are everywhere. In the bathhouses, in the marketplaces, in the hushed corridors of the Senate. Are they just siblings? Or is it something more? The historian Suetonius, never one to pass up a scandalous story, states it as fact. Caligula had illicit relationships with all three of his sisters, but Drusilla was his favorite, the one he treated as his wife. Is this true, or is it just slander, the kind of vile rumor that inevitably clings to unpopular rulers? It's another one of those questions where historians throw up their hands in frustration. The evidence is entirely circumstantial, based on the reports of writers who were hostile to Caligula and writing decades after his death. There's no confession, no smoking gun. But the sheer publicity of their relationship was, in itself, a scandal. He forced her husband to divorce her so she would be free. He paraded their affection openly, whether or not their bond was physical. It was certainly politically and socially incestuous. A deliberate blurring of all the normal family boundaries. Why? Was it a genuine, albeit deeply twisted, love? A result of their shared childhood trauma, clinging to each other as the last survivors of a shipwrecked family? Or was it something more calculated? Some scholars argue this was another one of Caligula's provocations. He was fascinated by the Hellenistic kingdoms of the East, like Ptolemaic Egypt, where sibling marriage was common among rulers to keep the bloodline pure. Perhaps he was trying to elevate his family to a new, divine status, adopting the customs of living gods rather than mortal Roman aristocrats. A way of saying the normal rules do not apply to us. Then in the year 38, the unthinkable happens for a second time. Drusilla, his anchor, his other half, falls ill. Just like her brother, she is struck by a raging fever. But this time, there is no miraculous recovery. Caligula's reaction is not just grief, it is a terrifying, world-altering explosion of sorrow. He is utterly unhinged. He plunges the entire Roman Empire into a state of official mourning. All business is forbidden. The law courts are closed. It becomes a capital crime, punishable by death, to laugh, to bathe, to dine with your family. He just cancels normal life. He wanders the palace for days, his hair and beard overgrown, moaning her name. Then he flees Rome, driving aimlessly through the Italian countryside, his grief a wild, restless beast. He returns only to deliver her eulogy, and during the speech, he does something that shocks the city to its core. He declares that his dead sister, Drusilla, is now a goddess. She is to be worshipped as Panthea, the all-goddess. A temple is to be built for her. A priesthood is established in her name. Women are to swear oaths by her divinity. It was one thing for a dead emperor like Augustus to be deified by a vote of the Senate. It was something else entirely for an emperor to unilaterally declare his own sister a major deity, on par with Jupiter and Juno. It's a move of breathtaking arrogance and emotional desperation. There's a sad, bizarre little detail that survives from this period. The Senate, eager to show their support for the grieving emperor and probably terrified of him, votes a series of lavish honors for the new goddess. One senator, trying to outdo the others in sycophancy, proposes that a statue of Drusilla house itself. Caligula, in a rare moment of lucidity, rejects the idea. He says it would be bad luck to have a woman in a place where men were discussing important matters. Even in the depths of his grief and madness, a flicker of old Roman misogyny shines through. The death of Drusilla is a clear turning point. If the fever broke his sanity, her death pulverizes the remaining pieces. The one person who perhaps understood him, who could maybe soothe the frantic energy inside him, is gone. He is not really alone, adrift on a sea of absolute power with no anchor to hold him to the shore of reality. The erratic behavior, the cruelty, the delusions of grandeur, all of it is about to get much, much worse. The shadow of his dead sister will loom over the rest of his reign, a constant reminder of the last real connection he ever had. With Drusilla gone, the Emperor seems to seek companionship in stranger and stranger places. His loneliness, magnified by absolute power, takes on a cosmic dimension. The whispers in the palace become even more bewildered. Servants and guards exchange nervous guard the new nightly ritual. Long after the last banquet guest has stumbled home, long after the palace has fallen into a tense quiet, you see him. Caligula, often still dressed in his opulent robes, will walk out onto one of the vast, marble-paved terraces of the Palatine Hill. Below him, the million souls of Rome are sleeping, their rooftops a dark, quiet sea under the night sky. But H.E.S. not looking down at them. H.E.S. looking out, he begins to talk. At first it might be a murmur, a low conversation you can't quite make out. But as the nights go on, his voice grows bolder. He is speaking to the moon. He calls her out, beckoning her to come down to him. He threatens her, he cajoles her, he invites her into his bed as a lover. He addresses her as Luna, or sometimes Selene, the ancient goddesses of the moon. He seems to believe with utter conviction that she is a conscious being, a divine entity who should rightly be his consort. Can you picture the scene? The guards standing motionless in the shadows, trying their best to look like statues. They are terrified. Their job is to protect the Emperor. But what do you do when the Emperor is having a loud, one-sided argument with a celestial body? Do you interrupt? Do you agree with him? Do you quietly back away and pray no one asks you what you witnessed? The ancient sources like Suetonius and Cassius Dio report these nocturnal conversations as proof of his madness. And it's hard to argue with them. You are watching a man whose grip on reality has become so tenuous that he sees the entire cosmos as an extension of his own court, a cast of divine characters who exist to serve his whim. But it doesn't stop with the moon. He begins to have conversations with other gods too, most notably with Jupiter, the king of the gods himself. The palace, you'll recall, was being extended to connect with the temple of Castrum Pollux. Now he starts building a private, covered bridge to link the palace on the Palatine Hill directly to the temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill. The message is clear, he wants easy access for his little chats. He's building a private corridor between his house and Jupiter's. He would whisper into the ear of the massive cult statue of Jupiter, as if sharing a secret. Sometimes the whispers would escalate into a full-blown argument. One historian records a particularly memorable and frankly hilarious exchange. Caligula was apparently heard shouting at the statue of the most powerful god in the Roman pantheon, threatening him. The emperor yelled, "You lift me up, or I'll cast you down." It's the ultimate expression of his ego. He sees himself not just as an equal to the gods, but as a rival, a competitor for cosmic power. This belief in his own divinity is solidifying. It's no longer just a matter of dressing up as a god for a party. He starts to genuinely believe he is one. He orders a special annex built onto the palace to house a new cult statue of himself. He establishes a priesthood dedicated to his own worship, and the priests are not some lowly functionaries. They are the richest and most powerful men in Rome, including his own uncle Claudius. He forces them to pay enormous sums of money for the privilege of serving as his priest. It's a brilliant, cynical move. Not only does it feed his ego, it also bankrupts the men who might have the resources to oppose him. There's a strange little tidbit that illustrates the bizarre fusion of his divinity and his paranoia. He becomes obsessed with a god from Gaul, a Celtic deity whose name is lost to us, but who was associated with thunder. Caligula, it seems, was terrified of thunderstorms. Whenever he heard thunder, he would hide under his bed. But as his divine pretensions grew, this became embarrassing. A god shouldn't be afraid of a little noise. So he came up with a solution. He had his own thunder machine constructed. Some sort of complex device using machinery and stones to create a loud rumbling sound. Whenever a real thunderstorm started, he would order his machine to be activated, to thunder back at Jupiter, challenging him to a noisy duel. Theologians and historians are still scratching their heads over that one. Was he trying to scare the weather away? Was he asserting his own power? Or was he just a terrified man making a lot of noise in the dark? These conversations with the gods, These nightly theatricals on the palace roof are more than just harmless eccentricities. They are a sign that the last barrier between the emperor's whim and the reality of the world has dissolved. He no longer sees himself as a steward of the Roman state, but as a supernatural being whose desires are cosmic laws. And if you are a senator or a guard, or just an ordinary citizen, this is the most terrifying development yet. Because how do you reason with a man who believes he can command the moon? How do you petition a ruler whose closest advisor is a statue of Jupiter? You don't. You just bow and you pray, and you hope his divine gaze doesn't happen to fall on you. The emperor's conversations with the gods seem to have inspired him. He is no longer content to simply challenge them with words or noisy machines. He needs to demonstrate his divine power in a way that is tangible, undeniable, and utterly, stupendously pointless. He needs a miracle, and he decides to perform one on the beautiful Bay of Naples. The story begins with a prophecy. Years before, during the reign of Tiberius, an astrologer named Thryllus had allegedly told the old emperor that Caligula had no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse across the Bay of Baiae. Baiae, a luxurious resort town on the bay, was the playground of the Roman elite. The bay itself was a wide, deep expanse of water, nearly 2 miles across at its narrowest point. The idea of riding a horse across it was a metaphor for the impossible. For most people, this would be a quaint historical anecdote. For Caligula, it is a personal challenge, a slight against his destiny, and he is going to prove the astrologer wrong in the most literal and ludicrous way imaginable. You find yourself swept up in the preparations. The emperor issues an extraordinary command. He orders every available merchant ship, every seafaring vessel from the ports all around, to be commandeered and brought to the Bay of Naples. This causes chaos in the supply chain. Grain shipments to Rome are halted. Trade grinds to a standstill. The city begins to experience food shortages, but none of that matters. The emperor has a point to make. The ships are gathered, hundreds of them. They are arranged in a double line stretching from the docks at Baiae to the neighboring port of Puteoli. They are anchored fast, side by side, creating a vast, floating foundation. Then, an army of engineers and laborers gets to work. They lay down immense timbers across the decks of the ships, bolting them together. On top of the timbers, they dump earth, tons and tons of it, packing it down to create a solid, level surface. They are building a road on the water, a 2-mile-long floating pontoon bridge. It's an astonishing feat of engineering, a testament to Roman ingenuity. It is also completely and utterly insane. It serves no purpose. It connects 2 towns that were already perfectly well connected by a coastal road. Its only function is to exist as a monument to one man's ego. Finally, the day of the grand event arrives. It's a spectacle designed to awe and intimidate. Caligula makes his grand entrance. He is not dressed as a Roman emperor. He is wearing the golden breastplate of Alexander the Great, which you've seen before. He carries a sword and a shield. On his head is a crown of oak leaves. He mounts a magnificent horse, not just any horse, but his favorite charger, and begins his ride. You watch from the shore along with a vast crowd that has been assembled to witness the miracle. He gallops across the floating bridge, his cape flying behind him, a retinue of Praetorian guards and his closest friends following. He rides from one end to the other, a conquering hero who has tamed the sea itself. But that's not enough. The spectacle lasts for 2 days. On the second day he rides back across, this time in a chariot, followed by a procession of spoils. These aren't captured enemy soldiers, but a hand-picked group of noblemen he has taken as political hostages. He stops in the middle of the bridge, which has been decked out with platforms and pavilions, and throws a lavish, drunken party that lasts all day on deep into the night. As darkness falls, the entire bridge and the surrounding coastline are illuminated by thousands of torches and bonfires. It creates, as one historian noted, an artificial day. Then, in a final act of drunken madness, Caligula orders many of the spectators who had crowded onto the bridge for the party to be thrown into the sea. Some who cling to the rudders of the ships are pushed off with poles. Why? No reason is given. Perhaps he was bored. Perhaps he thought. Perhaps he simply wanted to demonstrate that he held the power of life and death over everyone. Historians have been arguing about this bridge for centuries. Was it really as Suetonius described it? Or was the story exaggerated by his enemies to make him seem more unhinged than he was? Some scholars have suggested a more rational explanation. Perhaps it wasn't about the prophecy at all. Maybe it was a calculated act of propaganda, designed to intimidate a rival king in the east, or to impress the German tribes in the north with a display of Roman technical prowess. A way of saying, look what we can build just for fun. Imagine what our armies can do to you. There is even a fringe theory, a rather delightful one, that the entire project was a form of disaster relief. A recent famine had been caused by the disruption to the grain supply, and this massive construction project was essentially a Keynesian stimulus package, a way to employ thousands of laborers and inject money into the local economy. It's a nice thought, but it seems a little too sensible for our man Caligula. Whatever the reason, the image is what endures. The image of a man so consumed by his own power that he would halt the food supply of his capital city and spend a fortune just to ride a horse across a bay. He didn't just fulfill the prophecy, he smashed it into a million pieces with the brute force of unlimited resources. He had not just walked on water, he had paved it. The floating bridge was a public spectacle of madness, but the private displays, the ones that happen behind the closed doors of the palace, are in some ways even more terrifying. An invitation to one of the emperor's dinner parties becomes the most dreaded honor in Rome. You're not just going for a meal, you're entering the lion's den. And the lion is bored, cruel, and writes the rules as he goes. Let's go to one. You've received the summons, and not attending is simply not an option. You arrive at the palace, your best toga freshly laundered, your nerves are tangled not in your stomach. You are led into a dining room of overwhelming opulence. The couches you recline on are inlaid with ivory and tortoiseshell. The walls are shimmering with frescoes of mythological scenes that seem to mock the tense reality of the room. The air is heavy with the scent of exotic perfumes and, underneath it all, the metallic tang of fear. Caligula is already there, reclining on the most prominent couch. He might be dressed as Hercules, complete with a club and a lion skin cape. He greets you with a smile that is all teeth. You take your designated place, carefully arranging yourself, trying to look relaxed and important while feeling small and terrified. The food begins to arrive, and it's the usual display of absurd wastefulness you've come to expect. Platters of ostrich, entire roasted boars, intricate desserts shaped like gods and heroes. But the quality of the food is the least of your worries. Your real focus is on the host. His mood can turn on a dime. One moment, he is laughing, telling a genuinely witty story. The next, his eyes go cold and flat. He will fix his gaze on one of the guests, a wealthy senator perhaps, and begin a relentless interrogation. I was told your wife is very beautiful, he might say, his voice soft and menacing. Is she as beautiful as they say? The senator, sweating, will stammer out a reply. Caligula might then command his wife to be brought to him, take her to an adjoining room, and return a few minutes later to give a detailed and humiliating critique of her performance to her husband and the other guests, or help play little games. He might suddenly burst into a fit of wild, uncontrollable laughter. When the guests nervously ask him what's so funny, he'll lean in and whisper, I was just thinking that with a single nod of my head, I could have all of your throats cut right now. The laughter dies in the room. The only sound is the gentle clinking of a servant's wine jug. The joke, of course, is that it's not a joke. He takes a perverse pleasure in reminding the aristocracy of their powerlessness. You watch as he forces a former consul, a man from a noble and ancient family, to run alongside his chariot for miles, dressed in a simple tunic like a common slave. At dinner, he might make that same man wait on him at table. It's a systematic campaign of degradation. There's a particularly strange story, a bit of historical trivia that captures the surreal atmosphere perfectly. Caligula apparently had a favorite gladiator, a Thracian-style fighter. He also had a group of German bodyguards, fiercely loyal men who formed his personal protection squad. At one of these banquets, for reasons that are completely lost to history, a rumor started that the emperor had been assassinated. The German guards, in a panic, burst into the dining room, swords drawn, ready to slaughter everyone in sight. They ended up killing several senators who were reclining peacefully at their meal before the confusion was sorted out. Caligula, far from being horrified, was reportedly delighted by their loyalty. The surviving guests were, one imagines, less than thrilled. He also developed a new and disturbing hobby, whispering. He will suddenly lean over and whisper something in the ear of the guest next to him. That guest will turn pale, but his face will be a mask of polite terror. No one else knows what was said. Was it a death sentence? A crude joke? A piece of nonsense? The uncertainty is a form of torture. And then there are the executions. They can happen at any time. In the middle of a meal, he might casually mention that HES just signed the death warrant for another guest's father or brother. He might even halt the proceedings to watch an execution being carried out in the courtyard below, providing a running commentary on the victim's final moments as if he were a theater critic. It's in this hothouse of fear and luxury that you first hear more and more talk about his horse. At first, it's just another sign of his eccentricity. He mentions the horse at dinner, praising its beauty, its intelligence, its noble spirit. He compares it favorably to the senators reclining around him. The guests laugh, nervously. It's just another one of the emperor's bizarre jokes, right? HES just trying to insult them. But as the weeks go by, the talk becomes more frequent, more serious. He seems to be genuinely elevating this animal to a status far beyond that of a mere pet. And in a room where a single wrong word can get you killed, no one dares to point out that he is, in fact, just talking about a horse. They just nod and agree and pour themselves another glass of wine, hoping the emperor's terrifying gaze will pass them by. The horse. In this swirling vortex of fear, paranoia, and divine pretension, one creature stands serene and untouched. His name is Incitatus. The name translates roughly as full speed ahead or galloper, a fitting name for a racehorse, but he is so much more than that now. He is becoming a central character in the bizarre drama of Caligula Escort. Let's leave the tense atmosphere of the dining room and walk out to the stables. But stables feels like far too humble a word for what you are about to see. We are heading to a place that is rapidly becoming one of the most exclusive and luxurious addresses in all of Rome. You first lay eyes on him and you have to admit, he is a magnificent animal. The ancient sources don't agree on his color, but the popular imagination has always pictured him as a stunning white stallion, a descendant of the finest racing stock from Spain. He is perfectly proportioned, his muscles moving like liquid beneath a glossy coat. He has the intelligent, dark eyes of a champion. In a city obsessed with chariot racing, Incitatus was a superstar, a four-legged celebrity who had won countless races for the Emperor's Green faction. But his life as a simple athlete is long over. Caligula's affection for him has blossomed into a full-blown obsession. He is no longer just the Emperor's favorite horse. He is the Emperor's closest friend. You see the daily routine. Before a race, a cordon of soldiers would be placed around his stable, enforcing absolute silence in the neighborhood so that the champion's sleep would not be disturbed. This wasn't a polite request. It was an imperial decree. Any noise could see you arrested. Caligula begins to invite Incitatus to dinner, not in the stables, but in the palace itself. A special platform would be set up, and the horse would be led into the dining room to stand among the reclining senators. They would be expected to toast his health. The emperor would offer him wine in a golden goblet, which the horse, of course, would not drink, and feed him oats mixed with flakes of gold. This was the ultimate insult to the human guest. They were forced to share their dinner table with an animal who was clearly held in higher esteem by their host. The horse's life becomes a parody of an aristocrat's. He is assigned a retinue of personal servants, dedicated solely to his care. They are not just stable hands, they are attendants who cater to his every whim, as interpreted by the emperor. One of the most debated and bizarre details provided by the historian Cassius Dio is that Caligula began the process of teaching the horse to speak. Now this is where even the most sensationalist accounts strain credulity. It's highly unlikely Caligula literally thought he could teach a horse human language. It's more probable that this was a piece of theatrical mockery. Perhaps he would interpret the horse's wh in neighs and snorts for the benefit of the terrified senators. Incitatus disagrees with your proposal, Senator, he might say, a cold smile on his face. He finds your logic pedestrian. The act of consulting his horse on matters of state was another way to humiliate the powerful men of Rome, to show them that their advice was worth less to him than the noises of an animal. The bond between man and horse is in its own twisted way the most stable relationship in Caligula's life. With Drusilla gone, and his other sisters and wives treated with a mixture of possessiveness and contempt, Incitatus becomes the sole object of his uncomplicated affection. The horse cannot betray him. It cannot talk back, unless he wants it to. It cannot plot against him. It is loyal, beautiful, and powerful. In the horse, Caligula sees all the virtues he finds lacking in the humans around him. There's a strange, almost poignant sadness to it, if you look at it from a certain angle. He is the most powerful man in the world, a man who commands legions and can order the death of any citizen with a word, and his only true companion is an animal. It speaks volumes about his isolation, his paranoia, and his profound, perhaps pathological, misanthropy. But this is just the beginning. The luxury, the dinner invitations, the golden notes, these are merely the prelude. Caligula has a grander vision for his friend. He is not just going to make him a member of the court, he is going to give him a house befitting his new status. A house that will make the villas of the senators look like squalid little huts. The project is already underway. The emperor is building his horse a palace. The project is complete. Today you have been granted the privilege of a private tour of the new home of Incitatus. You walk towards a structure that stands near the palace grounds, a building that radiates an aura of quiet, absurd opulence. This is not a stable. This is a domus, a Roman townhouse designed and built for a single, four-legged occupant. You step through the doorway and your jaw, despite everything you've already seen, drops. The floor of the main entryway is not packed earth or simple flagstones. It is a breathtaking mosaic, intricate patterns of colored stones depicting scenes of what else? Chariot races, victories, a celebration of the life of the master of the house. You are led into the main stall, the horse's bedroom, and you have to stop and blink to make sure you are seeing correctly. The walls are not wood. They are lined with polished marble, gleaming under the light of ornate bronze lamps. The manger, from which Incitatus will eat his golden notes, is not a simple wooden roof. It is carved from a single, massive piece of ivory. His drinking trough is solid gold. The very air smells rich, a mixture of fresh, sweet hay, expensive cedar wood, and a faint trace of perfume. You see the horse's wardrobe. A collection of purple blankets lies neatly folded on a chest. Purple was the color of emperors, a dye so expensive it was worth more than its weight in gold. To use it for a horse blanket was an act of such extravagant waste it borders on the surreal. And then you see the jewelry. Hanging from a peg is a collar. Not a leather harness, but a collar made of gold and studded with precious stones. Diamonds, emeralds, pearls, all woven into a pattern of exquisite craftsmanship. This is not just an accessory. It is a treasure that would represent a life-changing fortune for any normal Roman citizen. It is the horse's everyday wear. The house has a staff, of course. You see them moving about, silent and deficient. They are not merely stable boys, they are house servants, tasked with maintaining the marble, polishing the ivory, and attending to the resident. They speak in hushed tones as if in a temple. Which, in a way, it is the temple of Caligula's madness. Did this place really exist as the ancient historians described it? This is a point of hot debate among modern scholars. Suetonius and Cassius Dio, our main sources for this, were writing long after Caligula's death and were openly hostile to his memory. They were eager to portray him as the ultimate example of a mad tyrant. It's possible they exaggerated the details for dramatic effect. Maybe the manger was just wood with an ivory inlay. Maybe the collar only had a few precious stones. But even if the reality was half as opulent as the stories claim, it was still a staggering statement. In a city where thousands lived in rickety, fire-prone tenements, the emperor had built a palace for his horse. It was the ultimate act of contempt for his fellow men. He was showing the Roman aristocracy, the senators and the wealthy knights, that in his eyes, his horse was not only their equal but their superior. Its comfort was more important than their dignity. Its house was grander than their ancestral homes. There's a strange little detail in the sources that often gets overlooked. Caligula didn't just give the horse a house, he gave him a wife, or rather a consort, a mare named Penelope. This is often treated as a throwaway line, another piece of strangeness, but it adds another layer to the parody. He is giving his horse a complete aristocratic life. A grand house, a noble wife, immense wealth. He is performing a bizarre, long-form piece of social satire, with the entire Roman elite as the unwilling audience. As you stand there, in the marble-lined stall breathing the perfumed air, you realize the true meaning of this place. This isn't about love for an animal anymore. It's a weapon. Every gleaming jewel is a calculated insult. It's a way of saying you, the great men of Rome, you with your ancient names and your proud traditions, you are less important to me than this beast. I can elevate him above you with a whim, and there is nothing you can do about it. The tour concludes. You are led back out into the normal Roman sunlight, your mind reeling from the sheer, quiet insanity of what you've just witnessed. The horse has a better house than you do. He has more jewels than your wife. He has a more secure position in the emperor's favor than any senator, and the most terrifying part is, you get the sense that Caligula is just getting started. The marble stable is just a warm-up act. He has a promotion in mind for Incitatus, a political career. The absurdity of the capital, with its marble stables and divine dinner guests, is about to be exported. The emperor is bored of Rome. He needs a new stage for his theatre of the bizarre, and he has decided on a grand military campaign. He announces his intention to lead the legions in person to conquer two of the most dangerous territories on the empire's borders, Germany and Britain. A wave of excitement and confusion ripples through the city. Germany was the place where his father, the great Germanicus, had won his fame. Was this an attempt to finally live up to his father's legacy? And Britain, the mysterious, misty island across the ocean channel, was a place of legend. Julius Caesar had gone there, but he hadn't stayed. A full-scale conquest would be a monumental achievement, something to rival the deeds of the greatest generals in Roman history. So you march. The emperor, accompanied by a massive retinue, his sisters, and a significant portion of the Praetorian Guard, heads north. The legions are mobilized. The great Roman war machine, which had been relatively quiet for years, rumbles back to life. You find yourself on the cold, damp frontier of Gaul, in a massive camp near the coast of the English Channel. The air is salty, the wind is relentless, and the grey waves crash against the shore with a menacing rhythm. The troops are drilled endlessly. The logistics are immense. Ships are being gathered for the invasion. The soldiers, at first, are filled with a kind of grim enthusiasm. A campaign under the emperor himself means the promise of glory and, more importantly, a large bonus. But as the weeks drag on, the campaign starts to feel strange. The emperor's behavior is erratic. He stages elaborate but pointless military exercises. He holds courts martial for officers who have committed no obvious offense. He seems to be playing at being a general, just as he played at being a god. There's a ridiculous and cruel incident that happens in the camp. Caligula receives a message that a group of German nobles who were serving as his personal bodyguards have fled. He flies into a theatrical rage, leaps from his dinner table, and announces a hot pursuit. He gallops off into the nearby woods with a cavalry detachment, plays a sort of hide-and-seek for a while, and then captures a few of his own men who had been sent ahead. He returns to the camp in triumph, dragging his prisoners in chains, and reprimands the legions who had stayed behind for their lack of vigilance. It's a farce, a piece of theatre designed to make him look heroic, and everyone knows it. Then comes the moment for the great invasion of Britain. The troops are assembled on the beach in full battle order. They stare across the churning grey water towards the hazy silhouette of the white cliffs on the horizon. The tension is palpable. This is it, the culmination of months of preparation. Caligula rides before them dressed again in the armor of Alexander the Great. He gives a rousing speech. The trumpets sound the signal to advance. The officers draw their swords, and then the emperor gives the most baffling command in the history of Roman warfare. He orders the legions to attack the sea. You stand there, a soldier in the ranks, utterly bewildered. Your centurion's face is a mask of disbelief. Attack the sea. What does that even mean? Do you charge into the waves? Do you throw your javelins at the water? The command is repeated, more forcefully this time. The trumpets blare again. The artillery is brought up, the great torsion-powered catapults and ballistas that were designed to batter down fortress walls. And they begin to fire. They launch huge stones on massive iron-tipped bolts, not at a British warp, but into the empty, indifferent ocean. The waves just swallow them up. It is a bombardment of nothing. Historians have been desperately trying to make sense of this for 2 millennia. Was it a collective hallucination? A massive misunderstanding? One popular theory is that the word for seashells in Latin, musculi, was also a slang term for the shelters used by military engineers. Perhaps Caligula ordered his men to attack the huts, and the order was misheard or maliciously misinterpreted by his enemies who wrote the history book. Another, more plausible explanation is that this was another act of calculated humiliation, but this time the target was his own army. There may have been a mutiny brewing, a refusal by the soldiers to board the ships for what they saw as a risky and ill-planned invasion. In response, Caligula decided to mock them. You won't fight the Britons, he might as well have said, fine. Then you can fight the ocean. That's all you're good for. It was a way of punishing their insubordination by making them perform a task of supreme, soul-crushing stupidity. Whatever the reason, the effect is devastating to morale. You are a Roman legionary. You are part of the most disciplined and effective fighting force the world has ever known. And you have just been ordered to wage war on geography. As the catapults thud and the waves crash, any remaining respect you might have had for your commander-in-chief evaporates into the cold, salty air. This isn't a campaign. It's a joke, and you are the punchline. The battle against the ocean eventually winds down. The catapults fall silent. The legionaries stand the wet stand, their weapons dripping with salt water, their faces a mixture of confusion and sullen resentment. The great invasion of Britain is officially over before it has even begun. But a victorious general, even one whose only enemy was the tide, must have spoils of war. Caligula, his conquest complete, gives his next order. It is, if possible, even more bizarre than the command to attack the sea. He declares that the army will now gather the treasures, the bounty, left behind by their vanquished foe. He orders the soldiers to collect seashells. Imagine the scene. Thousands of heavily armed Roman soldiers, the conquerors of the known world, are instructed to take off their helmets and fill them with shells from the beach. You, a legionary trained to build forts and fight in formation, are now on your hands and knees in the sand, sifting through seaweed for whelks and cockles. Your centurion, a man with scars from real battles, walks along the line, his face a thundercloud of suppressed rage, barking orders you. That's a pathetic-looking oyster. Find a more triumphant-looking scallop. This is humiliation on a grand scale. It's not just an insult to the army's pride, it's a parody of a sacred Roman tradition. The spoils of war were a vital part of a successful campaign. They represented the wealth and power of the conquered enemy, and they were paraded through the streets of Rome during a general's triumph, the highest honor a commander could achieve. The gold, the captured weapons, the enslaved chieftains, these were the proof of victory. Caligula has just redefined spoils of war as beach refuse. He calls the seashells the treasures of the ocean, spoils plundered from the sea god Neptune himself. He supervises the collection with a terrifyingly straight face, as if this is the most normal thing in the world. The shells are carefully gathered, sorted, and packed in 2 crates to be transported back to Rome. They are the official prize of the Great British Campaign. What on earth was he thinking? The debate over this moment is just as intense as the one about attacking the sea. If you accept the misunderstood word theory that musculi meant engineers' huts, then this part of the story makes no sense. But if you see the whole episode as an act of punishment and mockery against a mutinous army, it fits perfectly. It fits perfectly. It's the ultimate so there. He is treating his own elite soldiers like children, being punished at the seaside, forced to perform a pointless task. Some historians have tried to find a more symbolic meaning. Perhaps the shells, particularly pearl-bearing oysters, were seen as a genuine form of ocean wealth. Britain was famous for its pearls. Maybe Caligula was claiming all the potential wealth of Britain's waters without having to actually fight for it. It's a clever idea, but it feels a little too subtle for a man whose primary mode of communication was the theatrical sledgehammer. There's another, stranger possibility. Was this a religious act? Caligula's divine pretensions were growing by the day. By commanding the sea to be attacked and then plundering its treasure, was he performing some kind of ritual to demonstrate his own godlike power over nature and its deities? A way of showing Neptune who was boss. With Caligula, you can never rule out the possibility that he was operating on a level of religious mania that is simply incomprehensible to a modern mind. Whatever the logic or lack thereof, the practical result is clear. The campaign is over. The emperor declares a magnificent victory and prepares to return to Rome to celebrate a full triumph. He sends messengers ahead to inform the Senate of his glorious deeds. You can only imagine the faces of the senators as they read the dispatch. The emperor has vanquished the ocean and is returning with its fabulous treasure. Prepare the city for a celebration. So you march back. The legions trudge south, away from the cold coast, their mood darkened mutinous. Their pockets are not filled with bonus money, but with sand. They went north expecting to win glory and honor, to follow in the footsteps of Germanicus. Instead, they were used as props in the emperor's surreal personal theater. They fought a pretend enemy and won a pretend prize. As the army gets closer to Rome, Caligula's paranoia kicks in. He becomes convinced that the Senate will not grant him the triumph. He sends another, more menacing message, warning them not to dare stand in his way. The fear in Rome, which had briefly subsided during his absence, ratchets up to a new level. The conquering hero is coming home, and everyone is terrified of what he'll do next. The seashells are coming to Rome, and they are rattling with the sound of madness. The triumphant hero returns to Rome. But he forgoes the grand, traditional parade through the city, perhaps sensing that a procession featuring crates of seashells might not be received with the solemnity he desires. Instead, he settles for a smaller, but no less significant celebration, an ovation, and now that he is back in the heart of power, he can return to his favorite pastime, not conquering foreign lands, but systematically dismantling the pride and authority of the Roman Senate. You find yourself sitting in the Curia Julia, the Senate house in the Roman Forum. The air in this hallowed hall, where the fate of the world has been decided for centuries, is thick with a familiar dread. The senators, men with names that echo through Roman history, the Cornelii, the Fabii, the Aemilii, sit rigidly on their tiered benches. But they look less like masters of the universe and more like school children waiting for a particularly cruel headmaster to arrive. Caligula enters. He doesn't walk, he swans. He might be wearing a silk toga embroidered with gold, or perhaps one of his divine costumes. He takes his seat on the ornate curule chair, and a hush falls over the assembly. His speeches to them are no longer the conciliatory addresses of his early reign. They are masterpieces of psychological warfare. He will praise them with such over-the-top, effusive language that it becomes a form of mockery. Then, in the next breath, he will launch into a vicious tirade, accusing them of hypocrisy, treason, and disloyalty to his sainted predecessor, Tiberius, the very man they all hated and feared. He berates them for having celebrated Tiberius's death, forcing them to applaud his memory. The whiplash is intentional, designed to keep them confused and terrified. He takes a special, sadistic pleasure in forcing them to participate in their own humiliation. He will propose the most absurd honors for himself, a new temple, a new title, and watch with a smirk as they all scramble to their feet to vote yes with frantic enthusiasm. Any hesitation, any flicker of dissent in a man's eyes is noted. One of his favorite tactics is to revive old, forgotten charges against their families. Senator Piso, he might say it, his voice echoing in the silent hall, I was just rereading the records of your great-grandfather's trial for corruption 100 years ago. Fascinating stuff. It seems a tendency for disloyalty runs in your family. The senator can do nothing but sit there, his face ashen, while his family's honor is shredded in public. But the ultimate tool of humiliation, the one he brings out more and more frequently, is his horse. He starts talking about Incitatus in the Senate. He will compare the horse's virtues, its loyalty, its quiet dignity, its honesty, to the senator's perceived vices. My horse has never lied to me, he might declare, looking slowly around the room. Can any of you say the same? There's a famous, though likely apocryphal story that perfectly captures this dynamic. Caligula supposedly made a senator, a man named Bassus, run for miles beside his chariot. Later, at a dinner, when Bassus was exhausted and trying to recline, Caligula asked him solicitously how he was feeling. The terrified man, trying to curry favor, replied, "I feel like I've had a good run." He strips them of their traditional symbols of authority. He might forbid them from wearing the purple striped toga or using the ceremonial front row seats at the games that were their ancient right. These seem like small things, but in a society built on status and symbolism, they are devastating blows. He is unmaking them piece by piece. Why this relentless campaign? Historians have debated this for ages. Is it pure sadistic madness? A result of his paranoia, seeing enemies in every shadow? Or is it something more calculated? The political satire argument resurfaces here. Perhaps Caligula, raised in the paranoid court of Tiberius, genuinely believed the Senate was a nest of vipers, a corrupt and toothless institution that deserved to be mocked. By showing them to be sycophantic cowards who would applaud a horse and vote for any nonsense he proposed, he was exposing the hollowness of their power to the world. He was revealing that the Roman Republic was truly deadened, that their authority was a sham. This view casts him not as a simple madman, but as a political radical, a deconstruction's artist of tyranny. HES not just ruling, HES performing a critique of the entire Roman political system, using cruelty and absurdity as his medium. But for you sitting on that bench, the philosophical debate is irrelevant. The reality is the knot in your brow. The reality is the sweat on your brow. You are one of the most powerful men in the world on paper. In reality, you are a hostage. Your family's honor all depend on the whim of a man who seems to hold you in less esteem than his horse. And as the emperor continues his speech, you find yourself nodding enthusiastically, a bright false smile plastered on your face, when he suggests that what the Senate really needs is a member with some real integrity, a member like his dear friend Incitatus. The joke is getting less funny every time he tells it. The humiliation of the Senate is a political act. The conversations with the moon are a private madness. Now the two begin to merge. The emperor's personal delusions are about to become official state policy. He is no longer content to simply be compared to a god or to dress up as one for special occasions. He is going to be one full-time. The transformation begins subtly, then accelerates with breathtaking speed. First he starts insisting on being addressed with divine titles. It's no longer just Emperor or Caesar. Now it's Lord and God. He commands that all oaths be sworn not just by the traditional gods, but by his own genius, his divine spirit. Then he moves on to physical representations. He had already built a bridge to connect his palace with the temple of Jupiter. Now, he essentially declares himself Jupiter's roommate. He announces that he is the living embodiment of Jupiter Lautiaris, the chief deity of the Latin tribes. He doesn't just represent the god, he is the god. You witness a ceremony in the forum that leaves even the most jaded Roman observers speechless. He appears before the crowd dressed in the full regalia of Jupiter, a purple toga embroidered with gold stars, a scepter in one hand, and a stylized lightning bolt in the other. He stands there, his face arranged in what he clearly imagines as a mask of divine majesty, and accepts the worship of the crowd. This is a seismic shift. The Roman tradition of deifying emperors was a posthumous affair. A great emperor like Augustus could be declared a god by a vote of the Senate after he was safely dead. This was a way of honoring his memory and reinforcing the legitimacy of the imperial system. For a living emperor to declare himself a god was not just arrogant, it was a profound violation of religious and political tradition. It was something foreign, something associated with the decadent kings of the East, like the pharaohs of Egypt. It was deeply, fundamentally un-Roman. He establishes a temple dedicated to his own divinity on the Palatine Hill, and as we've noted, he creates a college of priests to serve his cult. This isn't just an honorific post, it's a full-time, ruinously expensive job. He sells the priesthoods to the highest bidders, forcing the wealthiest men in Rome to bankrupt themselves for the privilege of worshipping him. His own uncle, Claudius, and his horse Incitatus are named among the first members of this new priestly college. The inclusion of the horse is, of course, the ultimate punchline. The strangest and most obscure detail of this whole process involves a delegation from Alexandria. A group of Greek citizens and a group of Jewish citizens had come to Rome to plead a case before the emperor regarding civic rights in their city. The Jewish delegation was led by the famous philosopher, Philo of Alexandria, who wrote a detailed account of the surreal experience. Instead of holding a formal hearing, Caligula forces them to trail after him as he wanders through his newly decorated villas, inspecting the furnishings and giving orders to his servants. As they trot behind him, trying to make their legal arguments, he interrupts them with bizarre questions. "So you're the ones who refuse to eat pork?" he asks, derailing a complex discussion about taxation. The climax of the farcical hearing comes when he turns to them with a look of genuine puzzlement and asks a terrifying question. "Why do you refuse to believe that I am a god?" Philo and his delegation are paralyzed. There is no right answer. To say because you are a man would be a death sentence. To agree would be a betrayal of their monotheistic faith. They stammer, they prevaricate. In the end, Caligula just laughs, calls them pitiable fools who think I am not a god, and dismisses them. Philo writes that they left not knowing whether to be relieved or terrified, feeling they had only escaped death by being deemed too pathetic to kill. Gives us a chillingly clear window into his mindset. This wasn't just a political claim, he genuinely could not comprehend why anyone would not recognize his divinity. His megalomania is now the central organizing principle of the state. It affects foreign policy, taxation, and the daily lives of everyone in the city. You start to see his statues everywhere, not just in Rome, but across the empire. And these are not just statues of him as an emperor. They are statues of him as Mars, as Mercury, as Hercules. He is absorbing the entire Roman pantheon into his own identity. But even this is not enough. He is about to launch his most audacious and blasphemous project yet, a plan that will send a shockwave of horror through one of the most devout provinces of his empire. The emperor's divine ego, now fully inflated, can no longer be contained within the city of Rome. It requires a global stage. He looks out across the vast expanse of his empire and sees countless beautiful, ancient, and revered statues of the gods. And he has an idea. A terrible, brilliant, and deeply blasphemous idea. Why build new statues of himself when he can simply upgrade the existing one? The project begins. An order goes out from the palace to workshops across the city and beyond. The emperor wants new portraits of himself. Dozens of them. Marble heads, bronze heads, all carved in his likeness, all with that same look of imperious, slightly unhinged majesty. At the same time, another order goes out to the governors of the provinces. Famous and beloved statues of the gods are to be identified in Greece, the cradle of classical art. He sets his sights on one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, the colossal gold and ivory statue of Zeus at Olympia, created by the master sculptor Phidias. It is one of the most sacred and artistically significant objects in the entire Mediterranean world. Caligula's plan: to have it carefully dismantled, shipped to Rome, and reassembled with a new head, his own. You can imagine the horror of the priests at Olympia when they received this command. It's like being asked to draw a mustache on the Mona Lisa, but infinitely more sacrilegious. Fortunately for Zeus, the project is a technical failure. The historians who record the story, with a clear sense of divine justice, say that every time the Roman engineers approached the statue, it let out a mysterious booming laugh, and the scaffolding would collapse. A more likely explanation is that the local officials and artisans simply refused to cooperate or deliberately sabotaged the effort, risking their lives to protect their god. But other statues are not so lucky. Across the empire, you begin to see the surreal results of his decree. You walk into a temple dedicated to Mars, the powerful god of war, and you see the familiar muscular, armored body, but on top of the neck, where the bearded, helmeted face of the god should be, is the unmistakable, clean-shaven, slightly gaunt face of Caligula. You visit a shrine to Mercury, the fleet-footed messenger, and there he is again, a youthful, athletic body, topped with the emperor's head. He is literally putting himself onto the shoulders of the gods. It's a hostile takeover of the heavens. He is not just joining the pantheon, he is staging a coup. This campaign of divine identity theft reaches its most dangerous and inflammatory point when he turns his attention to the province of Judea. He is aware, from his farcical meeting with Philo's delegation, that the Jews are unique in their stubborn refusal to worship any god but their own. They do not even permit images or statues within their holy temple in Jerusalem, the very heart of their faith. For Caligula, this is not a theological position to be respected. It is an act of personal defiance. It is a challenge. And so he gives the order that will push the entire region to the brink of a massive bloody revolt. He commands that a colossal, gilded statue of himself, in the guise of Jupiter, be forged and installed in the Holy of Holies, the most sacred inner sanctum of the temple in Jerusalem. The governor of Syria, Petronius, is tasked with carrying out this order. He is a practical, experienced Roman administrator, and he knows this is not just an unpopular command. It is a declaration of war on an entire people. It is a command to commit an act of sacrilege, so profound it will inevitably lead to rebellion. Petronius, caught between the mad whim of his emperor and the fury of a province, tries to delay. He travels to Judea and is met by tens of thousands of protesters. They are not violent, they are resolved. They are farmers, merchants, old men, women, and children. They abandon their fields at harvest time, risking starvation, and simply lie down on the ground, telling the governor that he will have to kill every single one of them before that statue enters their temple. Their passive resistance is absolute. Petronius is shaken. He writes a letter back to Caligula, a masterpiece of bureaucratic foot-dragging. He says the statue is not yet ready. The artisans are taking great care. The quality of the gold is not quite right. He is trying to buy time, praying that the emperor will forget or change his mind. But Caligula does not forget. He sees Petronius' delay for what it is, insubordination. He sends a chilling reply. He thanks Petronius for his diligence, and then, in the final lines, he orders the governor to take his own life as punishment for his tardiness. The stage is set for a catastrophe. The statue is nearly complete. The governor has been sentenced to death. The people of Judea are preparing for martyrdom. The entire eastern part of the empire is a powder keg, waiting for a single spark. And all because the man in Rome cannot tolerate the existence of a single temple in a distant land that does not contain his face. The project of replacing the gods' heads has reached its logical, terrifying conclusion. The crisis in Judea hangs in the air, a distant thundercloud of impending disaster. The fate of Governor Petronius and an entire province rests on a knife's edge. But back in Rome, in the heart of the storm, Caligula's attention has shifted. He has humiliated the Senate, terrorized the aristocracy, and declared himself a god. Now he is ready for his masterpiece. The final, perfect insult. The one that will be remembered for 2,000 years. Long after his bridge of boats has sunken, the gold has been scraped off his statues. The scene is the Senate House again, that familiar room, now so thoroughly drained of its authority. The senators are assembled, their faces torn and anxious. They never know what to expect these days. A new tax, a surprise execution, a lecture on the divinity of the moon. Caligula makes his entrance. He surveys the room, letting the silence stretch out, savoring their fear. He begins to speak, his voice calm and deliberate. He talks, as he so often does, about the state of the Roman government. He speaks of the need for stability, for loyalty, for officials who are truly dedicated to the well-being of the empire. He talks about the consulship, the highest office in the Roman political system. The 2 consuls who served each year gave their names to the year itself. It was an office of immense prestige, the pinnacle of a Roman noble's career, a position once held by Cicero, by Caesar, by the great heroes of the Republic. He laments the quality of the men who hold the office now, their corruption, he hints, their secret disloyalty. The senators shift uncomfortably. They know this script. This is the wind up before the pitch, the rhetorical justification for his next act of cruelty or absurdity. Then he changes tack. He starts to talk about his dear friend, his most trusted advisor, a creature of impeccable dignity, noble bearing, and unwavering loyalty. He speaks of his sterling character, his simple tastes, oats, mainly, and his profound wisdom, which he expresses not in empty words but in quiet, steadfast presence. He is, of course, talking about his horse. He describes the life of Incitatus, the marble house, the jewel-studded collar, the staff of servants. He reminds them that the horse is already a priest of his own divine cult. He has already been elevated to a status far above that of a common animal. And then he delivers the line, the one that will echo through history, the one that perfectly encapsulates his entire reign. He looks out at the sea of pale, terrified faces and makes the announcement. I am therefore thinking, he says, with the air of a man proposing a perfectly reasonable solution to a difficult problem, of making him a consul. Silence. A.D. profound and absolute silence. The kind of silence that feels louder than a scream. Did he really just say that? The senators stare at him, their minds struggling to process the words. He wants to make his horse a consul, the highest official of the Roman state. This is not a joke. Or if it is, the punchline is so vast, so cosmically insulting that it ceases to be funny and becomes a terrifying rupture in the fabric of reality. To make a horse a consul would be to declare, in the most unambiguous way possible, that the entire Roman political system is a meaningless farce. It would mean that the highest honors of the state, the position that men schemed and fought and killed for, could be given to a farm animal. It would be the ultimate statement of contempt. You look around at the other senators. You see a flicker of disbelief, then dawning horror, then a desperate, panicked search for the correct response. What do you do? Do you laugh? That would be suicide. Do you object? Even more suicidal. Do you applaud? How do you applaud the idea of serving as a colleague to a horse? Caligula watches them, a faint, cruel smile playing on his lips. He has them. He has finally pushed them to a point beyond which language fails. He has broken their world. The news of this announcement would spread through the city like a fever. It is the story that will come to define him. The mad emperor who made his horse a politician. It is the perfect symbol of a reign where the absurd has become normal, where power is so absolute that it is accountable to no one, not even to the basic tenets of reason. In that moment of stunned silence in the Senate House, everything Caligula has been doing comes into focus. The humiliation, the god complex, the bizarre projects, they were all leading to this. This is his legacy, his grandest piece of performance art. He has taken the most revered institution in Rome and proposed putting an animal at its head. The question that hangs in the silent, terrified air is, what, in God's name, will he do for an encore? Let's just pause here for a moment in the echoing silence of the Senate House. Let the emperor's words hang in the air. I plan to make my horse a consul. This is the moment that has cemented Caligula in history as the quintessential mad emperor. For 2,000 years, this single, surreal proposal has been the headline of his reign. But now, in the quiet of this room, let's ask the question that historians have been wrestling with ever since. Was this truly the act of a raving lunatic, or was it something else? Something colder, more calculating, and in its own way even more terrifying. Let's explore the first possibility, pure madness. This is the traditional view, the one favored by the ancient sources and countless storytellers since. In this interpretation, the man on the emperor's throne is genuinely unprofoundly mentally ill. The fever didn't just change him, it shattered his mind. His brain is a storm of delusions, paranoia and grandiose fantasies. From this perspective, making his horse a consul is the logical endpoint of his illness. He has already blurred the lines between human and animal by inviting Incitatus to dinner and giving him a marble house. He has blurred the lines between mortal and divine by declaring himself a god and conversing with the moon. Why wouldn't he blur the line between animal and statesman? In his broken reality, if he is Jupiter, then his horse is a creature of supreme nobility, far more worthy of honor than the sniveling, treacherous humans he is forced to rule. It's a decision that makes perfect sense. If you are living inside his head, it's not a joke, it's a sincere, if insane, personnel choice. This view is compelling. It accounts for the wild spending, the conversations with statues, the incoherent military campaigns. It paints a picture of a tragic figure, a young man broken by trauma and then by illness, lashing out at the world from the prison of his own mind. But then there's the other interpretation. Let's call it the masterful insult theory. This argument suggests that Caligula was not mad at all. Or, if he was, his madness was channeled through a brilliant, cruel, and deeply cynical political intelligence. In this view, the proposal to make Incitatus a consul is the single greatest act of political satire in human history. It's a calculated gesture designed to expose the utter servility and powerlessness of the Roman Senate. He wasn't seriously planning to have the horse show up for debates and sign legislation. He was making a point. Think about it from his perspective. He has demanded they worship him as a god, and they have. He has forced them to bankrupt themselves to be his priests, and they have. He has murdered their friends and relatives on a whim, and they have continued to applaud him. He has taken every sacred tradition and venerable institution of Rome and spat on it, and their only response has been to ask for more. So he takes it to its most absurd conclusion. He is essentially saying to them, "You are all such contemptible, spineless cowards that you will approve anything I say. Your highest office, the consulship, has become so meaningless that I could give it to my horse, and you would all stand up and cheer. You have no real power. You are props in my play. This animal is more honest and worthy than any of you." This interpretation is in many ways more chilling than the madness one. A madman is a force of nature, a hurricane you can only hide from. But a sane man who is this cruel, this dedicated to the art of humiliation, is something else entirely. It suggests a deep, nihilistic void at the center of his being. He doesn't just want to rule the world, he wants to prove that the world is a contemptible, meaningless joke. Which version is true? The historical record is forever ambiguous. Suetonius, who gives us the most famous account, simply states that Caligula promised to make the horse a consul. He never says that he actually did it. In fact, Caligula was assassinated before the year in which this supposed consulship was to take place, so the horse never actually held the office. This could support either theory. The madman was stopped before he could enact his final fantasy, or the political satirist made his point with the threat alone, never intending to follow through. There's even a fringe third option, a sort of middle ground. Perhaps it started as a joke, a drunken boast at one of his terrifying dinner parties. Then, seeing the horrified reaction of his guests, he realized what a powerful tool of intimidation it was. The idea, born of a moment's whimsy, became a central part of his arsenal of terror. We will never have a definitive answer. The madness or masterful insult debate is one of the great and resolved puzzles of ancient history. But as you sit there in the Senate House, watching the emperor's cruel smile, you have to decide what you believe. Is the man in front of you a lunatic who thinks his horse is qualified for high office? Or is he a cold-blooded political artist who knows that you are so terrified you will pretend to agree with him? It's hard to know which of those two possibilities is more frightening. The proposal to make a horse consul hangs over the city like a toxic fog. It's a joke so profound it has ceased to be funny, and now the laughter, what little genuine laughter was left in Rome, begins to curdle. The emperor's sense of humor, always cruel, now descends into a realm of pure, unadulterated menace. The line between a quip and a death sentence becomes terrifyingly thin. You see it in the small interactions, the daily moments of terror that make up life in the palace. The emperor's unpredictability becomes his most potent weapon. He develops a fondness for a particular kind of joke, the near execution. He might be in conversation with a senator he particularly dislikes. He'll make a show of embracing him, of treating him like a dear friend. Then he'll whisper in his ear, "Don't move a muscle, or your head comes off." He'll hold the man in a friendly embrace for an uncomfortably long time, a knife perhaps gently pricking the man's neck, hidden from view. He then releases him with a hearty laugh. as if they've just shared the most amusing secret. The senator stumbles away, pale and shaking, while Caligula turns to his companions and remarks on how easily some people lose their composure. At the games, he grows bored of the usual chariot races and gladiatorial contests. He needs to add his own special twist. He might order the awnings that shade the crowd from the brutal sun to be drawn back on the hottest days, and forbid anyone from leaving. The crowd is left to beg, sometimes for hours, for his amusement. Or he'll have the usual intermission entertainment, acrobats and more memorable. He might have a group of condemned criminals, some of them elderly or with physical disabilities, thrown into the arena to be devoured by wild beasts, presenting it as a hilarious spectacle. His wit becomes a tool of pure sadism. A man who has come from a long line of bald men is summarily executed for the crime of having a full head of beautiful hair, which Caligula declares is an insult to his family's legacy. Conversely, he forces another man with a prominent bald patch to be shorn completely, for the crime of looking like a goat. There is no logic, no pattern. There's a chilling story about a wealthy knight who, having been condemned to the mines, pays a large bribe to have his sentence commuted to a less strenuous job. Caligula hears of this and summons the man. He asks him what his new job is. The man, terrified, explains. "An excellent idea," he says, "but I have an even better one." He orders the man to be taken to the arena and made a beast fighter. A job with a near certainty of a swift and brutal death is the man's brief moment of hope before it is so cruelly extinguished. This is where the laughter occurred or less. It's one thing to mock the powerful and expose their hypocrisy. It's another thing entirely to torture people for sport. The fear in Rome is no longer just the political fear of the elite. It's becoming a more primal, more widespread terror. Anyone could become the subject of one of the emperor's jokes. He even turns this cruelty on his own family. He had a beloved grandmother, Antonia, a woman widely respected as a paragon of old Roman virtue. In the early days of his reign, he had heaped honors upon her. But as his madness deepens, he begins to resent her. He sees her quiet dignity as a silent rebuke to his own behavior. He subjects her to a campaign of snubs and insults until, as the historian Suetonius claims, he drives her to take her own life. "I can do anything to anyone." It becomes his mantra, the philosophical core of his reign. The palace, once a place of glittering parties, is now a labyrinth of fear. The servants tread silently, their eyes always downcast. The guards stand a little too rigidly, their hands gripping their weapons a little too tightly. Everyone is waiting for the next outburst, the next bizarre command, the next cruel joke that isn't a joke at all. The proposal about Incitatus now seems less like a piece of political satire and more like a symptom of a mind that has lost all connection to human empathy. He has elevated a horse because he has lost the ability to see the humanity in the people around him. They are no longer people, they are toys, props, and punchlines. And in a world run by a comedian whose joke skill, nobody is laughing anymore. The treasury is empty again. The initial confiscations from executed senators provided a temporary infusion of cash, but the emperor's spending habits are a bottomless pit. The games, the building projects, the sheer cost of maintaining his divine lifestyle, it all requires a constant flow of money. And Caligula, ever the innovator, comes up with a new fundraising scheme. One so audacious, so profoundly shocking to Roman morality, that it demonstrates just how far he has fallen from even the most basic standards of decency. He decides to turn the imperial palace into a brothel. You have to understand the context here. The Palatine Hill was more than just the emperor's residence. It was the sacred heart of Rome. It was where the city was founded, the location of some of its oldest and most venerable temples. The home of Augustus, the first and most revered emperor, was a relatively modest house on this hill, preserved as a national shrine. For Caligula to defile this space was an act of supreme sacrilege, but he is beyond caring about such things. The plan is put into motion with chilling efficiency. A special wing of the palace, one of the vast and luxurious new additions he has just finished building, is sectioned off. It is furnished with opulent couches and decorated with erotic frescoes. A price list is drawn up. And then comes the most shocking part, the staffing. The workers for this new imperial enterprise are not to be common streetwalkers or slaves. That would be too mundane. Caligula orders a roundup of the wives and daughters of high-ranking senators and knights. These are aristocratic women, matrons of respectable families, who are now forced under imperial command to work in the palace brothel. He sends heralds out into the city, into the forum and the bathhouses to announce the opening of this new amenity. They publicly invite men of all ages and classes to come to the palace and enjoy themselves. It is presented as a generous service provided by the emperor for his people. Imagine the humiliation. Imagine being a senator, a man of immense pride and public standing, and hearing a herald in the forum announce that your wife is now available for a fixed price in a room down the hall from where the emperor eats his dinner. It is a level of degradation that is almost impossible to comprehend. It's not just an insult, it's the complete inversion of the social and moral order. Why did he do it? The official reason, the one he gave, was to raise money for the state. And it's true, the venture was reportedly quite profitable. But historians, both ancient and modern, agree that the financial motive was likely secondary. The real purpose was, once again, humiliation. It was another way to attack the aristocracy, to grind their noses in their own powerlessness. He had taken their money, he had taken their lives, and now he was taking the honor of their families and selling it by the hour. It was a way of saying, your precious bloodlines, your claims to moral superiority, they mean nothing to me. I can turn your wife into a prostitute with a snap of my fingers. There is a historical debate, of course, about whether the story is literally true in all its lurid details. Our source for it is, once again, Suetonius, who was not above embellishing a story to make a point. Some scholars suggest that this might be a gross exaggeration. Perhaps Caligula simply levied a heavy tax on the wealthy, and his enemies metaphorically disprostituting their wives. Or maybe he forced them to lend him their wives for his own private parties, and the story grew from there. But the fact that the story existed at all, that it was considered plausible by his contemporaries, tells you everything you need to know about the atmosphere of his reign. Even if it was just a rumor, it was a rumor that people could believe. They had seen enough of his other outrages to think that, yes, this is something he would do. You walk past the Palatine Hill at night. The place that was once the symbol of imperial majesty and order now has a different energy. You see men, some furtive, some bold, making their way to the designated entrance. You hear the faint sound of music and drunken laughter coming from a part of the palace that should be dark and quiet. The home of the emperor, the seat of government for the entire civilized world, is now running as a commercial enterprise of the most sordid kind. The moral compass of the empire is not just broken, it has been shattered, and its pieces are being sold to the highest bidder. And as the degradation reaches its absolute peak, you can feel something else in the air. A new tension. A sense that a breaking point is near. You cannot humiliate and terrorize the most powerful people in the world indefinitely without consequences. The breaking point is here. In the shadowy colonnades of the forum, in the quiet back rooms of senatorial villas, and most importantly in the tense, whispering barracks of the Praetorian Guard, a conspiracy begins to form. It doesn't start as a grand, organized plot. It starts as a murmur. A shared glance of disgust between two senators after Caligula has finished one of his tirades. A quiet, bitter word exchanged between two officers of the guard who have been forced to participate in one of his farces. These are dangerous whispers. The palace has ears everywhere, but the outrages have become so extreme, the personal risks so high, that the danger of inaction finally starts to outweigh the danger of acting. The conspiracy slowly coalesces around a handful of key figures. There are senators like Marcus Vinicius, who is married to one of Caligula's sisters and has had a front row seat to the madness. But the real heart of the plot lies where it so often does in Rome with the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's own bodyguard. The key figure here is an officer named Cassius Chaerea. He is not a young, hot-headed revolutionary. He is a veteran soldier, an old man who had served with distinction under Caligula's own father, the great Germanicus. He is, by all accounts, a brave and competent officer. But he has a problem. He has a high-pitched, slightly effeminate voice. And Caligula, with his unerring instinct for cruelty, has fastened onto this. It has become his favorite joke. Every day, when C.H. area comes to get the watchword, the daily password for the guard, Caligula gives him a deliberately insulting and suggestive word. Hell for Priapus, the name of a minor god of fertility, or Venus. He mocks him in front of the other soldiers, calling him a girl and making lewd gestures. For a proud, old soldier like C.H. area, this is an unbearable, daily humiliation. It's not just an insult to him, it's an insult to his honor, to his years of service, to the memory of the father he had so admired. His personal resentment becomes the spark that ignites the conspiracy. He wants revenge. He finds willing allies among his fellow officers, men like Cornelius Sabinus. Their motives are not just personal. They are professional soldiers, and they see Caligula as a disgrace to the Roman military. The fate triumph, the war against the sea, the collection of seashells. These were not just eccentricities, they were insults to the very idea of Roman martial valor. They also have a more practical fear. They see the emperor's erratic behavior as a threat to the stability of the state, and therefore to their own positions and the future of the guard itself. The plot begins to take shape. It is not a plan for a coup or a civil war. It is a plan for a simple, brutal assassination. The question is not if, but when and how. Getting to the emperor is not the problem. As officers of the guard, they have access to him every day. The challenge is finding the right moment, a time when he is relatively isolated, away from his loyal German bodyguards, who are known to be fiercely devoted and might fight to the death to protect him. They consider several plans. One idea is to kill him while he is sacrificing at the temple of Augustus. Another is to throw him from the palace roof during the games. But these are too public, too risky. They need a place that is contained, a moment of transition. The perfect opportunity presents itself during the Palatine Games, a series of theatrical performances and chariot races held in honor of the memory of Augustus. The festival takes place right there on the hill, near the palace. The emperor is a dedicated attendee, staying from morning until night. The conspirators decide on the final day of the games. Their plan is to strike as the emperor is leaving the theater to go to his lunch. There is a private underground tunnel, a cryptoporticus, that connects the theater area with the palace. It's a route he often takes to avoid the crowds. It is quiet, secluded, and perfect for an ambush. The tension in the days leading up to the assassination is almost unbearable. The conspirators have to go about their daily duties, interacting with the emperor, laughing at his cruel jokes, all while knowing they are about to kill him. Cassius C.H. area has to go to Caligula each morning to receive the password, suffering his usual humiliation, his face a mask of discipline while his mind is filled with murder. There's a fascinating, almost certainly fictional, detail that the ancient historians add to the story. They say that on the night before his death, Caligula had a dream. In his dream, he was standing before the throne of Jupiter in heaven, and then, with a single kick, sent him tumbling back down to earth. It's a little too perfect, a little too neat, but it captures the sense that even in the world of myth and omens, Caligula's time was up. The actors are in place. The stage is a quiet, subterranean hallway. The final act of the tragedy is about to begin. It is the 24th of January in the year 41st, the final day of the Palatine Games. The air in the small theater near the palace is stuffy and overwrought. The day has been filled with performances, Greek dances, tragic recitations, and a particularly bloody pantomime about a highwine being crucified. Caligula has been in his element, absorbed in the world of the stage. You watch him from the crowd. He seems strangely jovial today, almost manic. During the gory crucifixion pantomime, he was delighted when the stage blood flowed more freely than expected. He has been drinking heavily since morning. At one point, he turns to his uncle Claudius, who is sitting beside him, and makes a joke about his own impending death, a moment of black humor that will seem merely prophetic in just a few hours. The conspirators are all around him, playing their parts. Cassius C.H. stands on duty, his face an impassive mask. The other officers are in their designated positions. The tension is electric. They had planned to strike earlier in the day, but Caligula announced that he was enjoying himself so much he intended to stay for the evening performances as well, skipping his usual lunch break. The plotters exchange panicked glances. The window of opportunity is closing. Finally, as the afternoon wears on, his friends and his uncle Claudius manage to persuade him to leave the theatre for a while to get some food and visit the baths. This is the moment. He rises from his seat. The crowd parts before him. He is surrounded by a small group of senators and his personal attendants. He starts to walk towards the exit that leads to the infamous underground tunnel. His German bodyguards, his loyal protectors, are for some reason not with him. Perhaps they were dismissed, or perhaps they were simply delayed in the crowd. Historians still debate this crucial point. Was it a lucky break for the assassins, or a deliberate part of their plan? As he enters the vaulted passageway, a group of young noblemen from Asia, who have been brought to Rome to perform a hymn in his honor, are rehearsing nearby. Caligula, a true lover of the theatre, stops to talk to them. He is charmed by their performance and almost decides to turn back and have them perform for the whole audience. For the conspirators, this is a heart-stopping moment. Their target is lingering, chatting, about to walk back into the safety of the public theatre. Cassius Chaerea knows he cannot wait any longer. He steps forward. He approaches Caligula from behind, as if to ask a routine question. The emperor turns. Chaerea, the old soldier whose voice has been the subject of so much ridicule, asks for the watchword for the day. Caligula, true to form, sneers and gives him another insulting, effeminate password. It is the last mistake he will ever make. It is the trigger. Chaerea, his face contorted with a year's worth of suppressed rage, bellows, "Take this," and draws his sword. He strikes the first blow, a glancing slash across the emperor's neck and shoulder. It's not a fatal wound, but it is the signal. Caligula stumbles, wounded and shocked. He tries to run, but there is nowhere to go. The other conspirators, led by Cornelius Sabinus, swarm around him. The tunnel echoes with the sounds of their shouts and the brutal, wet thud of their blades. "This one's for my father." One might have yelled. "This one's for the Senate." Another. It is not a clean, professional assassination. It is a frenzied, furious butchery. He falls to the ground, crying out that he is still alive. He curls into a ball, trying to protect himself, but the blows keep coming. They stab him again and again, a storm of pent-up hatred released in a few moments of savage violence. The final blow, it is said, was delivered by Chaerea, a thrust through the chest. The boy who was the army's darling, the young man who was Rome's hope, the divine ruler who talked to the moon, now lies dead on the cold stone floor of a dark private tunnel. His reign, with the adoring cheers of 1,000,000 people, has ended here in a bloody, ignominious heap. The performance is finally over. The echoes of the final shout fade in the tunnel. The deed is done. Caligula lies still. For a moment, there is a stunned silence among the assassins, the air thick with the smell of blood and the heavy weight of what they have just done. They have killed a god, or at least a man who thought he was one. The chaos that follows is immediate and absolute. The news rips through the palace like a wildfire. Some of Caligula's litter-bearers, hearing the commotion, run into the tunnel with their poles, trying to defend their master, but they are beaten back by the armed and frenzied conspirators. The German bodyguards, finally realizing what has happened, are unleashed. They are not thinking about politics or liberation. Their loyalty was personal, and they are now consumed by a blind, berserker rage. They draw their long swords and begin to kill anyone they find. They don't know who the assassins are, so they kill senators, ushers, innocent bystanders, anyone who happens to be in their path. The palace, which a moment ago was a place of festival, becomes a slaughterhouse. Meanwhile, the conspirators, their vengeance enacted, scatter. They had a plan to kill the emperor, but it seems they had no clear plan for what came next. There was no single, unified vision for the future of Rome. Some of them, the more idealistic ones, dream of restoring the Republic, of giving power back to the Senate and the people. Others simply wanted a new, more stable emperor. In the midst of this pandemonium, the other members of the imperial family are hunted. Caligula's wife, Cie Sonia, is the next to die. A centurion finds her in her chambers weeping over the body of her husband, which has now been brought in. With her is their infant daughter, Dewey Drusilla. The assassins show no mercy. The centurion runs Cie Sonia through with his sword. The baby girl, it is said, is taken by the ankles and her head is smashed against a wall. The logic is brutal and simple. Leave no heir. Erase the entire line. And what of the most famous member of the family? Caligula's uncle Claudius. The man who had always been considered the family idiot. The stammering, limping, awkward scholar who had only survived this long because no one, least of all Caligula, had ever seen him as a threat. During the chaos, Claudius is, by his own account, terrified. He knows that the assassins are killing anyone with a connection to the dead emperor. He runs and hides. He finds a secluded balcony and pulls a heavy curtain in front of himself, hoping the storm will pass him by. A common soldier, a man named Gratus, is wandering through the palace, perhaps looking for loot. He sees a pair of feet sticking out from under a curtain. Thinking it's someone hiding from the rampage, he pulls the curtain back, ready to strike. And there he finds him, the 50-year-old Claudius, trembling with fear. He falls to the soldier's feet, begging for his life. But Gratus, in a moment that will change the course of Roman history, does something extraordinary. He recognizes the uncle of the dead emperor. And instead of killing him, he and his fellow soldiers suddenly see an opportunity. They don't want the Republic. The Republic doesn't pay bonuses. They want an emperor, one who will be grateful to the men who put him on the throne. They salute character. They hoist the terrified, bewildered scholar onto their shoulders and carry him off to the safety of the Praetorian camp. The Senate, meanwhile, is having a debate. In the hours after the assassination, they have gathered, full of a newfound bravery. They talk grandly of restoring liberty, of bringing the assassins to justice, but also hailing them as heroes of a return to the old ways. They are so busy, making speeches and arguing about the glorious future of the restored republic, that they fail to notice what is happening just down the street. The Praetorian Guard has already decided. They have their man. They have the power. The Senate can talk all at once, but the guards have the swords. The brief, bloody dream of a restored republic is over before it even began. The end in the tunnel was not just the end of one man's life. It was the end of any illusion that the Senate held real power. The reign of Little Boots was over, but the system that created him, a system where absolute power rested not with an institution, but with whoever could command the loyalty of a few thousand soldiers, was still very much in place. The next act of the Roman drama was about to begin, with the most unlikely leading man imaginable. The blood is being washed from the floors of the palace tunnel. Claudius, the trembling emperor in waiting, is busy negotiating a massive bonus for the Praetorian Guard who so conveniently found him behind a curtain. And the Senate, their brief, fanciful dream of a restored republic evaporating in the morning light, is forced to officially recognize the new reality. They have a new master, and one of their first and most urgent tasks is to deal with the memory of the old one. You now witness the final posthumous act of Caligula's reign, his own erasure. The Roman elite, the men he had so systematically terrorized and humiliated, finally get their revenge. A motion is brought before the Senate. It is called damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. It is the ultimate punishment for a hated ruler. It is an attempt to surgically remove a person from history itself. The motion passes unanimously with grim satisfaction. The official process begins at once. Across the city, and in the provinces, the work crews get their orders. You watch as they swarm over the statues. The dozens of portraits of Caligula, the ones he had so proudly placed in temples and public squares, are torn down from their pedestals. The marble heads are smashed with hammers, the features obliterated until they are nothing but jagged, unrecognizable stone. The bronze statues are melted down, the metal to be reused for something more practical. Perhaps coins or doorknobs. The very image of the man is to be wiped from the face of the earth. You see onomasons climbing ladders with chisels and mallets. They approach the great inscriptions on arches and public buildings, the ones that list Caligula's name in titles. Carefully, painstakingly, they chip away the letters of his name, leaving a conspicuous, empty space. Future generations will look at these monuments and see a blank spot, a ghostly absence where a name used to be. He is to become an imperial footnote, an emperor whose name cannot be spoken. All of his decrees are declared null and void. The laws he passed, the honors he granted, all are revoked. It is as if his 4 years in power never happened. It was all just a bad dream from which Rome has finally awoken. Even his coinage is targeted. The coins minted with his face are to be withdrawn from circulation and melted down. Owning one becomes a sign of poor taste or even disloyalty to the new regime. The historical accounts of this process are fascinating, as they reveal the messy reality of trying to erase a memory. Did it really work? Not entirely. You can't just delete for years of history. The projects he built, like the extension to the palace, were still standing. The people he had killed were still dead. And the memory of his reign was too traumatic, too bizarre to simply be forgotten. In fact, the very act of erasure created its own kind of memory. That blank space on an inscription shouts his absence louder than his name ever could. And of course, the historians, men like Suetonius Tacitus and Cassius Dio, were under no obligation to forget. In fact, they did the opposite. They took the condemned memory of Caligula and made it immortal. They collected the stories, the rumors, the scandals, and they wrote them down. And because his memory was condemned, they had no reason to be fair or balanced. They were free to paint him as the ultimate monster, the perfect caricature of a tyrant. And what of the horse, the consul in waiting in Citatus? What becomes of the most famous supporting actor in this drama? The historical record falls silent on this point, which has allowed for a great deal of speculation. The most common, unlogical, assumption is that he was retired from public life. Claudius, the new emperor, was a sensible, scholarly man. He had no use for a political horse. The marble stable was likely repurposed. The jewel-studded collar was probably confiscated and its gems put to better use. In Citatus, his brief, strange moment in the spotlight over was likely put out to a comfortable pasture somewhere, allowed to live out his days simply being a horse again, blissfully unaware of the political storm he had been at the center of. In the end, the attempt to erase Caligula failed spectacularly. By trying to wipe him from the record, his enemies ensured that the most sensational, most monstrous, and most entertaining version of his story would be the one that survived. They wanted to make him a blank space, but instead, they made him a timeless cautionary tale about what can happen when absolute power falls into the hands of a man who is either profoundly mad or just has a very, very dark sense of humor. The memory was not condemned, it was crystallized, forever preserving the tale of the boy they called Little Boots. And so, the frantic, terrible story of the boy in Little Boots comes to its gentle close. The echoes of the shouting in the tunnel have long since faded, replaced by the quiet hum of the night that surrounds you now. The marble palaces, the glittering sea, the faces of the terrified senators, you can let them all dissolve, like figures made of mist, drifting away on a soft and easy breeze. There is nothing left to understand, nothing left to question. The madness, the cruelty, the grand, absurd gestures, they are just shapes in the past now, losing their sharp edges, softening, blurring into the deep uncomfortable darkness behind your eyes. Your own breathing is the only sound that matters now, a slow, steady rhythm, like gentle waves on a far-off, peaceful shore. The story was just a path, a winding path to lead you here, to this quiet place of rest. You can feel a pleasant heaviness beginning to spread through your limbs, a deep and welcome comfort. The world of emperors and empires can be left behind. It has no hold on you here. Here, in this stillness, there's only peace. You are safe, you are comfortable, and you are drifting deeper and deeper into a quiet, dreamless sleep. Our journey together tonight ends here, in this quiet place. Should you need another tale to accompany you further into rest, my library of stories is always open for you. May your dreams be kind. Good night.